doesn't show me on the Google Hangouts how many people are watching anymore. That's odd. This is a new and strange world. Some Okie Dude says, "What's up, boys?" Not much, man. My semester started a couple weeks ago, so that's why I've been the absentee father of the comic book YouTube community. What about you, Boom? What have you been up to?
Oh, just working and just I don't know, just working. I actually think that ever since maybe it's just a coincidence, but it's been kind of a blah 2 week period for comic book commentary in general and YouTube video. All the guys on YouTube that I know and love, and I think all of us have. It's just following Bill Maher's rant. There was like some collective depression that set over YouTube, and I don't know, but
I mean, I didn't want to comment on it because in my eyes, like the guy, whatever he's saying, whether or not he believes in it or not, he gets more publicity when he says dumb shit like that than any other day of the year. So, my logic is I don't want to give him any more credence. So I try not to react from it. Like I know it's stupid, but
yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. I heard if you want a good response to Bill Maher's, you should read Peter David's response. His Facebook response was pretty good.
yeah.
It was a very detailed response. Yeah, you just go and read it. It's too long to get into, but it was pretty good.
Hmm. I'll
And
have to
he's
check.
someone that used to love. He used to be someone who loved Bill Maher, but now not so much.
Yeah, I think I saw that. I think I saw something about him. It might have been Peter David saying that he used to watch Bill Maher. We'll go live in one, or we'll kick this off in one sec. I got somebody just messaged me on Twitter. Are you guys live yet? Yes, yes, we are. Let's see. Still really weird that Hangouts won't tell me when we're live anymore. That's freaking odd. All right, whatever. Thanks, YouTube.
Well, you're live, aren't you? It says live on my end.
It says live. I mean, that's how Samoki Dude's been able to like talk with us. But like, how on like the Google Hangouts thing on the bottom, it'll tell you how many viewers you have.
Mhm.
No such thing right now, which is weird. Whatever. We can always get started. Okay. Hey guys, welcome to the return of Let's Talk Comics. This is our 19th episode where myself and another co-host in the comic book community talk about one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, characters, constructs, we pretty much hit it all. This week, of course, we had to make our big comeback from a fairly long hiatus with our normal partner in crime, Comic Boom. Great to have you back on, man.
Good to be here, Dark Knight. Good to be here.
Always, my friend. So, uh, I know for some of you that might be clicking on this, you might be wondering, what are we talking about? Why does the thumbnail say that DC's turning back the clocks? And so this comic or this commentary was kind of predicated on the fact that when Boom and I were discussing, what we should talk about this week, he had brought up whether or not DC is lightening up. Well, there are some books that are coming out with a little bit of a lighter tonality between the Wonder Comics imprint, spearheaded by Brian Michael Bendis, including like Young Justice, Style Age for Heroes, the Naomi book, uh, you know, and but at the same time, there is this deep, dark contrast to it with Heroes in Crisis being like one of the big current events. Doomsday Clock is a little bit darker. Batman's kind of depressing. Uh, and generally Superman leading up to this point has been a little bit off kilter in terms of positive to negative tonality. So I was thinking about this. And when you really consider the last time that something like this happened, it was the 90s. The 90s had a lot of big events going on, a lot of big impactful stories. Yet they were all very different tonally. Now, Boom, I know, back in the 90s you were concurrently reading comics. So for you, what other similarities do you see between the 90s for DC and now?
Well, I think you basically alluded to it. One of the things that made the 90s, the 90s was, well, first let me say the 90s have gotten a very bad rap because when most longtime collectors like myself, but even maybe newer collectors, and by newer I mean people who've been collecting 5 to 10 years comics, when they think of the 90s, they say, oh, that's when the boom, that's the big bust, because the high, a lot of comic books were sold in the 90s, but there was also a spectacular bust in the 1990s where the industry sort of bottomed out. So there was this huge boom bust in the 90s. But the reality is that there was a lot of great comic books as well, because even though there was a lot of garbage comics, because the comic book market was glutted, you had all kinds of tones from DC. DC published all kinds of comic books, and there was a lot of exciting events, a lot of big, huge, epic events that I recall. And well, I mean, I remember Grant Morrison's the DC 1 million, a lot of crazy events, like all the stuff that happened, and it went from darkness to light to everything. There was something in there for everyone, and I really think right now that in comparison now, if we're going to make some comparisons to the 90s, is that DC, I think right now is in a state of flux. And I do think DC editorially right now is struggling to sort of find out exactly what they want to do. And I actually think they're a little bit more screwed up than maybe. I think they're trying to put lipstick on the pig. I think they're making an adjustment in tone. Because I think they're trying to suck and blow at the same time, and they might even pull it off. I think that's what I texted to you, and trying to suck and blow at the same time. Well, that was probably too vulgar a statement, but you know what I mean.
Right.
They might pull it off because look, with Wonder Comics and with like you said, the darker tone, with the Justice League, Doomsday Clock, Metal. I don't know, DC. DC's still sort of riding high right now, but what they're not doing, there's no consistency. There's no diehard consistency. They're trying to give us the best of both those worlds. And what's interesting is that when I compare that to Marvel, I see Marvel maybe trying to go back to a little bit more to their roots with titles like the X-Men and the Punisher, and part of me thinks maybe Marvel's going back to their roots a little bit more successfully, but I don't know.
Well, I know I'd agree to that. And it's a conversation to be had is, and it's a relevant question. People are asking, well, at any given time, no two books are going to feel alike. But the thing with DC is the big titles are very dissimilar in tonality, right? It's not just like there's this big overarching theme of, just to name one, like civil indecency and political corruption, and then there's like these other books that are kind of like these flecks of sugar in black coffee, right? But here we have really big storylines that are running very parallel to one another, and DC kind of acknowledges them both, but they don't collide, they don't reference each other, and they're two very different stories and tonality. For example, and again, to really drive home the connection to the 90s, we're in a world where we have 3 Justice League books right now. Feels really 90. You remember Justice League Detroit, Justice League International, Justice League Extreme? Like, fortunately, we're not like that saturated in like the 90s kind of out there high octane storytelling, but like we're getting there. Not to mention, at the same time, we have something as depressing and morally downtrodden as Heroes in Crisis. Both really big, impactful stories that are touching different parts of the DC universe, but the overall universe doesn't have anything super cohesive to run by because they're trying to abide by those two separate domains, right? But and also, DC, like the 90s, is very creator oriented. They're trying to get these big, high profile talents, and they're just letting them do whatever. The editors don't really have as much of a grip on what they're doing. There's not a lot of editorial control, and there are some that are of the mind that creators having absolute freedom to do what they want is better. And others like editorial control, and there are people like me who like a balance between the two. But we're in a world where Bendis has a monopoly on the Superman titles. Tom King has his reins on Batman. so on and so forth. So
Well, I will add to that. I do think for whatever reason, and maybe it's just my bias way of thinking, but I remember the '90s being a little bit more tighter in terms of continuity. They as we got a lot of different titles from DC in the '90s, and it was a great time. But even though we had some big events and some continuity crises, so to speak,
mhm,
we it felt like it made a little bit more sense. There was more connectivity between the various titles, whereas now it's quite clear that DC seems to be less concerned about it. They give lip service to it.
mhm.
It's interesting. Scott Snyder will say that, he's talking to Tom King. Tom King's talking to Bendis. Bendis is talking to Tomasi. Tomasi's talking, and that everyone's talking. It's interesting that all these creators are talking to each other, yet their books really don't seem to line up particularly well in terms of continuity, which, again, I'm not going to say is necessarily that big a deal if the books are really selling well. And a lot of them are selling well.
Mhm.
But I guess part of me is I wish there was a little bit more, like you said, cohesiveness, because the only thing that really feels, I will say that the Justice League under Snyder is starting to feel like between Metal and Justice League, there's a cohesiveness there. But you could really tell the disconnect when you try to connect Doomsday Clock with the
And
rest of
Heroes in
it. You can
Crisis.
tell that's where the disconnect started. Obviously there's a deviation. There was a Jeff Johns vision of Rebirth, and that seemed to smash head on in the Scott Snyder's Metal moving forward, because I don't think those two can seem to sync very well up, at least at this point.
Right. No, I totally agree with you on that. And then in the chat, we have Taylor Pector that just joined us saying, "Hey guys, what's up, man?
Hey, Taylor.
Thank you for joining us tonight, bro." No, I totally 100% agree with what you're saying here. And it feels like DC just feels a little bit confused because as far as I understand, Doomsday Clock should have been done by now. So as far as things were planned out, Doomsday Clock would have been done sometime in November of last year. And then, Justice League would have carried the torch, and then on to Heroes in Crisis or what have you. It just and from what I understand, I'm really behind on Doomsday Clock. After the 2 month, after they decided that it was going to be bi-monthly, I decided to kind of just wait until issue 10 comes out and then start the series over from scratch so I can enjoy it. And then on top of that, we're also getting delays to Doomsday. You actually texted me the link to what Doomsday Clock number 9 being delayed again.
Yeah,
So
number 10 being delayed. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that, and from what people are telling me, Jeff Johns seems to be retroactively editing the script now because of these delays, because they've mentioned Heroes in Crisis. Now, if you think about this, Jeff Johns was working on the script to this book back when Rebirth was in its early days
Yeah.
/ its inception. So Heroes in Crisis was barely even a thought back then. Actually, it wasn't until about a year after that they brought up Sanctuary, and Sanctuary was supposed to be its own self-titled miniseries. It wasn't this big event, Heroes in Crisis. So there's no way that Heroes in Crisis was included in the original script. And the thing that kind of worries me here is that I hope there, and again, there's this big argument of whether or not they can do this to Jeff Johns, but I think that because he's not an executive anymore, he doesn't have that same level of pull. Therefore, DC at this point can say, we have these other things going on. You now have to abide by this because of whatever reason, the comic publishing late. And it scares me because if this story doesn't end up being great, I'm always going to think, well, what could have been? In my head, there's always going to be this paranoia that whatever Jeff Johns' vision was molested by whatever, caused the delay in shipping. So
Yeah.
it is definitely worrisome. I think your analogy of trying to suck and blow at the same time is very fitting. Very,
Yeah.
very
But
fitting.
but I still maintain that it's it is possible to have half your books to be more Rebirth like and the other half to be darker. It's certainly possible. And just in fairness here, looking at the current storylines, particularly out of the pages of Justice League maybe being more on the darker side out of Scott Snyder's Metal, with the totality, the source wall breaking. with the Justice League Annual. Starman is the counterpoint to Lex Luthor. He believes that the 7 positive forces of creation are more hopeful. That Lex Luthor is very pessimistic. He thinks that the universe is destined toward doom. Starman and the Justice League believe that the universe is headed more toward light and to justice and the symbol of Perpetua. And I mean, that's going to play out. And you know that at some point it's going to end in spectacular fashion with the good guys winning. So it's headed toward the light, but we're going to go through some darkness getting there. Heroes in Crisis, I think, okay, that's going to be more of a psychological drama. It's going to play out its own way. But, you know, there's a lot of reason. I think there's a lot of reason to have to have some reason to believe that it's not all depression. This is all, I'm excited. Like I actually, as much as I'm not a big fan of Heroes in Crisis, I am kind of curious to know how Justice League ends. Even Batman Tom King's, I'm wondering how the hell Batman is going to end up being happy, if he is at some point. Mm-hmm. We got Tomasi on Detective. He's doing a spectacular job on that. We you know, Wonder Woman, as much as I'm not a big fan of J. Willow Wilson, I mean, there's some lightness there, even though it's cliche writing. I mean, there's reasons to smile here if you're looking in terms of tone. We could easily come up with a check mark back and forth, and I think that all is not lost here.
Well, the thing with me is I'd slightly disagree. I feel like Justice League has been kind of light and campy and attempting to pull at Silver Age comic book, dynamics. It feels very Silver Age in the style of storytelling, even in the dialogue at times. Scott Snyder seems to be trying to pull at that sort of like sentimentalism, to that era of comic book storytelling. And for me, the darkness only feels dark in the sense that these are big tasks, big trials for these heroes to overcome that seem insurmountable. To me, from the beginning, even through Metal at times, I mean, Metal was darker, but like by the end, it just felt big and bombastic and adventurous. And whether or not it falls within my taste of storytelling is another thing. But to me, that's kind of been the lighter side of DC, especially with the Justice League title. We got done with Drowned Earth, and it was the story about, these disparaged space gods coming back to take revenge on Earth, more specifically Atlantis. And Aquaman gets these mystical powers from Poseidon, and we talk about the world oceans, and it's very much big, cosmic, out of this world, high octane storytelling. So for me, I feel like that's kind of the lighter end of DC, where, and the part that I can agree with you on is Heroes in Crisis is very clearly the dark, far more depressing, far more, I'm not going to call it adult. I wouldn't call it adult at all, actually, but you kind of catch my drift here.
Sure. And yet it sells the most. It seems to sell the most. I think it's arguably DC's best-selling comic, next to Batman, possibly, Heroes in Crisis.
Yeah, and the issue, what the thing is too. I was just talking to the guy that owns the shop that sponsors my channel, and like, Doomsday Clock, if they were doing it right, should be by far the highest selling comic book every month, and I mean by far. Like, the fact that book isn't consistently selling 150,000 units is entirely on DC. Entirely on DC, because not for, like, for me, like we talked about how I'm kind of waiting for issue 10 to come out, and then I'm going to start from the beginning. I pick up the floppies because, I like to A, support the industry, support good stories, but B, I'm a collector. So between those two things, I'm still buying individual books. I couldn't tell you how many people I know that stopped picking up the single issues and just are trade waiting, or they're waiting to just start picking up the issues as it gets closer. And that's affecting DC sales big time. Not to mention that kind of minority of people that probably just get really uppity and irritated by the fact that there is a delay. Henceforth, that causes them to not buy the book out of spite, So it's a little bit tricky. And Taylor asks, isn't Doomsday Clock still selling between 135 and 140? I think in its higher, in its peaks, but I remember, I might be wrong, so feel free to correct me on this. I remember seeing a couple times Doomsday Clock was selling like 120, 110, you know, and by me saying 150, I mean 150 should be like the minimum, you know, like something as big as Doomsday Clock that's intertwining the Watchmen universe and the DC universe, written by Jeff Johns, drawn by Gary Frank. Like 150 should be a low point
Well,
for that.
I think, well, first, given the delays, it's still selling pretty damn well, and
Right.
it is selling pretty good, Doomsday Clock. But I agree with you; it should be selling more. And I think, frankly, if it had come out on time and had the direction of the DC universe not changed as it clearly has changed, the degree to which I don't think maybe at some point in the future it'll be known. But if it hadn't changed, I think that you're absolutely right. It would have definitely sold more.
Right.
If
You know, like it had everything going for it. Not to mention with a lot of these overarching rebirth like plot threads that were poking out, we had other books referencing Doomsday Clock. So even if you weren't really thinking about it, the content you were reading was enticing you to pick up the book between the button. A majority of the beginning of the Rebirth Titans storylines were poking at it. Action Comics was poking at it. Superman was poking at it. Detective Comics was poking at it. Like we had so much ramping up this title, and now because of whatever reasons, I'm not even going to begin to start surmising why Doomsday Clock went to bi-monthly and then on to, you know,
well,
further delaying almost every issue of Doomsday Clock. That is dropping the sales, I think, by huge numbers.
well, we don't even need to speculate all that much. We can just look at the evidence on the ground that we know of. You know, when in doubt, just look at what's actually selling and look at the direction now. There is no question, if you look at what DC did, that DC very clearly was hoping that they were putting a lot on Bendis.
Mhm.
Bendis was given, in my view, too much responsibility by DC. A lot of pressure was put on Bendis. I mean, the direction of the Superman titles, it's all Bendis. They, you know, with Wonder Comics, it's pretty much all Bendis. They planned the publishing line was given to Bendis. This whole DC thing was all Bendis. I mean, I don't even think that they planned on giving Tomasi Detective. I think they did that just because they felt that they screwed Tomasi over, so they gave him Detective leading into Detective 1000. I think they made a strategic error. I think DC was caught by surprise at the reaction that people had against what they thought was a lukewarm reaction to Bendis because it wasn't really hot. And I think that, you know, Superman sales, Action Comic sales they've been lukewarm. They've been a little bit better than under Tomasi and Gleason. We got to acknowledge that, but not spectacularly. You know, only on average, I think $11,000 to $15,000 more per issue. I think they're down. Bendis is still only 11,000 issues ahead of where Superman issue 45 was in terms of sales. So that's lukewarm. That's got to be a disappointment for DC, no matter how you cut it. And you know, you look at the latest issue of Young Justice. It looks like it's going to be a decompressed tale. It's Bendis's dialogue. He continues to struggle with it. And that's despite guys like me trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, you know, and arguing with guys like you about, you know, cutting him some slack and, you know, but it's, you know, like I said, I admire DC for taking a big chance, but and I also, part of me admires them for swallowing a little bit of their pride, you know, putting Tomasi back on the titles. I think that they're struggling a bit and they're struggling with their editorial direction and they're, you know, and all in all, at least I don't really know what the hell they're doing, but at the same time, I'd be lying if I said I'm not getting some perverse enjoyment out of it, because as much as I hate Heroes in Crisis, I gotta admit I get a chuckle every time I read an issue.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, I wanted to briefly bring this up before we got too far. Doomsday Clock's peak sales in 2018 was issue 3 at 175,000 copies, and then issue 4 at 162,000, right? And that's when they were still monthly. I'm pretty sure after 4 is when they went bi-monthly.
I think you're
Issue
right.
5 already drops to 156. Issue 6, 141. Issue 7, 134. Issue 8, 124. So over the course of 1 year, that book went down 50,000 copies between the time that it went from monthly to bi-monthly. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to bring that up just to.
Well, it's an excellent point. There's no question that delays, delays are not helping it at all. And quite frankly, if we're if Doomsday Clock has no consequence, that's going to be a huge disappointment, because we all thought that Dr. Manhattan was sort of maybe going to end up being the bad guy, the reason why the DC universe was getting darker and why it needed a rebirth, and that Superman would ultimately defeat the more of the darker Dr. Manhattan-esque Watchmen universe. But now it looks like it's Perpetua in the pages of Justice League that that maybe Perpetua was going to be the villain. She's the creature behind the source wall that embodies all these 7 different forces. So I think Perpetua, I'm speculating, maybe has replaced Dr. Manhattan as sort of the powerful negative force. And I think that maybe is where the direction may be changed. And, again, it's speculation based upon the current storylines. And I'm not really sure what role that leaves for Dr. Manhattan or the Watchmen universe.
And that's why I'm getting afraid, because I think that whatever caused the delays is now, forcing Jeff Johns to take the knee to DC, and DC's giving that type of emphasis to other writers like Bendis. And I'm really afraid that that's going to mitigate the effects that Dr. Manhattan is having on the DC universe. And to be 100% honest with you, between me, just being a comic book fan, being in the know, wanting to read Doomsday Clock, and all the other books I was reading, having this cohesive plot thread running consistent throughout, leading to Doomsday Clock, I was hyped. I was ready. Not only was I down to go through to get to the end result, I was ready for the journey. And so it's really bothersome, because again, if Doomsday Clock is A, not great by the end of it, and B, does not have impact, I'm going to feel cheated. And immediately I'm going to start thinking about the what ifs and what could have been. And I think, again, that's a result of just DC not being cohesive. Taylor Pector in the chat had brought up, and he thinks that one of the things that exemplify the fact that DC isn't cohesive is they've been putting out a lot of minis and maxi series to kind of accommodate the fact that there aren't a lot of ongoings right now, especially not a lot of popular ongoings. So it just shows that it feels like DC has less faith in what they're putting out right now. And
yeah,
it shows.
Well, and it's not just that, and I'm sure Marvel's definitely doing that as well. They're putting out more minis, which Marvel did a complete editorial shift, because they were used to be against. In 2017, they actually said that they didn't like having maxi series, because they felt that it actually sold less if they indicated it was a maxi series or a mini series. And so now, but they're doing more maxis and minis now too. And I think DC's done it with mixed success. I think Raven has been terrible. The 12-issue maxi series by Raven by Marv Wolfman did not sell very well. A lot of the miniseries aren't necessarily selling well. Freedom Fighters under Vendetti, which it's not bad. I think it's selling mediocre. I think I personally like it when they experiment like that, and I think that's an indication that they're trying to get a handle on the market. And to be honest with you, I feel sorry for DC a little bit, because you and I can talk as smart all we want. We can, not that we're bitching, but if we are bitching about not being enough hope and rebirth, well, then why the hell do we keep buying Heroes in Crisis? I know I buy it every goddamn month. I know everyone I know who bitches about it buys it. I buy it so I can review it and complain about it.
I don't buy it.
I mean, what's that?
I said I don't buy it. I dropped Heroes in Crisis. Let me put it this way: all the books that I was bitching about, I dropped.
Well, that you have you have a healthy state of mind. I clearly am. I do not. I have an addiction problem, and I like reading Heroes in Crisis, even though it drives me crazy. It's something that it says something about the comic book market. It says something that what appeals and drives people into the comic book, because a lot of people are buying it, and a lot of people really, really defend Heroes in Crisis, and that to me is another interesting topic, because I think it's related to why did DC abandon Rebirth? Well, maybe the answer is just really simple. Maybe a little bit of darkness and depression sells comic books, according to the evidence. So, I mean, say what you will about Tom King and his style of writing and his proclivity for quoting Shakespeare out of context. I mean, the reality is that it seems to sell comic books.
Well, and so something too that Taylor brings up in the chat. He thinks that burnout is also a reason. Most of the creators are sadly getting burned out because of the biweekly schedule. Sadly, it seems like the one writer that hasn't lost energy is King on Batman. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to attribute it to burnout because a majority of the DC titles that were biweekly are now monthly. So they don't really have as much of an excuse. I just think honestly, it's them running in without a plan. I feel like, it seemed like they had something cohesive going with individual stories running alongside and sometimes being interconnected with Doomsday Clock. But after the delays happened, they really can't do that. Like for me, the whole Fabian Nicieza and Scott Lobdell on Nightwing is one of the biggest indicators of that. There is no forward planning on that book whatsoever. They were like, "Oh shit, this whole DC, the whole Doomsday Clock thing's run dry. Wally's gonna die, so like we can't do the Wally Nightwing, relationship in Titans, which pulls into the Doomsday Clock thing. So like, what do we do with Nightwing? Oh shit, like why don't we just let Fabian Nicieza write Nightwing? Whose smart idea was it to bring in Fabian Nicieza? Um, First
Well,
question. But it's like there doesn't seem to be any forward planning. Like clearly they have no idea what to do with Dick Grayson. They're letting Tom King do his thing as they have been, which I guess is consistent with how they've been doing it regardless. But then they're like, "Oh, hey Bendis, you wanna do stuff?" And then Bendis like, "Yeah, I want to do stuff." But you know what? I want to do some more stuff over here. Okay, you can do it. Gets a call back from Bendis a week later. Hey, DC, I want 2 imprints to myself. Brian, I mean, I don't know if we can do that. I'll just go back to Marvel. All right, Brian, of course you can do it. The one of the, and we've talked about this a couple times, is how DC is just like, let me think of a way to not be profane. They're whipped. They're absolutely whipped by their I don't even want to always say higher tier creators, but they're more popular creators. They're not saying no to anybody.
well, I don't expect them. I don't expect any company to do that if the creator sells comic books, and so they're not going to say no to Tom King and Bendis. I think that there's a little bit of buyer's regret when they bought Bendis. I mean, I think that they're experiencing that. There's no question about that. You can just look at the sales to know that they must experience that. I don't know. I've got some mixed. I think DC's overall their game plan here. They respect. They tend to give a lot of they right now they're caught. They want to avoid the mess of Marvel. They don't want to get too political, and I think they would like to give creators have they prefer to step back and let creators do their own thing. But what they're doing more and more in this last 6 months, it's becoming prevalent, is that there's a lack of editorial oversight in terms of the continuity, and they're letting, to me, they're more and more they're letting creators do their own thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, you have to you got to reel them in so that they don't destroy the mythology. So you can still give creators the freedom to go in certain directions, but you can still pull them back and say, hey, don't go that far. I mean, it's just like in the recent issue here of Female Furies. I mean, it's so clearly, it's such a forced feminist like political issue, and I don't even comment about politics and comic books, but it basically bastardized Kirby's Fourth World, and it basically made Granny Goodness, I mean, actually basically essentially raped by Darkseid. And I mean, Darkseid would never do that. Darkseid doesn't need a piece of tail. He's a god. He has an entire planet that worships him. I mean, the writer doesn't even understand Darkseid, doesn't even understand the Granny Goodness, doesn't even understand Big Barda. I mean, it was a complete bastardization. All to make a point of trying to make all women victims and all dominated by men. They actually had him participate in like a beauty pageant, like the female. It's so bad. You have to read the issue to see how bad it is. Like, it's just unbelievable. But it's an example of, letting a writer go too far, and all you have to do is reel them in a bit. Like,
yeah, Koala One seems to agree, and I quote, "It's so bad."
yeah.
And that is complimentary of what I've been saying this whole time, in that DC editorial is either A, not paying attention, or B, just doesn't care. For me, and I don't know if I've talked about this with you, but I've spoken about this a lot with other people, in the fact that when you choose, right, as a writer, as a creator, to take part in something in a pre-existing continuity, it is your responsibility to have some level of consistency. And I'm not saying that I want this monotonous thing that goes on for 1,000 issues and everybody's the same, right? Because by doing that, there are no breakout runs in comic books, right? There is nothing to herald in the industry. If things were like that, Batman Year One wouldn't exist. Dark Knight Returns wouldn't exist. But here's the thing. The one thing that you can say about a lot of the biggest runs in comics, and again, I'm going to use Batman because he's arguably the most popular comic book character of all time, or at least right now. There are a lot of things that separate The Long Halloween from the Year One, from the Court of Owls, from Batman the Cult. But the thing is, even though they have their differences, there are consistent elements throughout, in the character, in the plot, in the storytelling, but they find great ways to make their stories unique. And the issue with DC, they're like, we need unique stories, so you do what you got to do. And like, it's of course on editorial, because editorial is not saying no, but at the same time, they're hiring writers like Tom King who just, they want to tell their stories. And I know I've said this up with you. A lot of people, especially the bigger names, are writing characters for stories. They're not writing stories for characters. If you want to write a character in name and in appearance to your story, then make it an Elseworld. Create your own characters. I mean, for God's sake, a lot of people are like, oh, it won't sell. It won't do well. Let me give you one word. Watchmen. Alan Moore couldn't use the Charleston characters, created his own. Now it's the most, and I will say this without a doubt, the most prolific graphic novel of all time. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. And one of the issues that I think, and it's one of the reasons why Tom King is so successful right now, and again, this is my opinion. Anybody watching this later, feel free to attack me. I don't care. But I just ask that you not get your panties in a bunch. The thing is with people like Tom King, I don't even remember where I was going. I was so focused on saying that.
You were thinking of panties.
Yeah, that's a very distracting element. What was I saying? Continue.
You were criticizing Tom King's writing.
I know I brought up the fact that he writes characters for stories. I don't know. I guess, like, just to say that he's manipulating these characters for the stories he wants to tell, and frankly, it's lazy. Oh, and I remember now. People buy this book because with Tom King particularly, Tom King mentions that he's trying to do this deep emotional stuff, and people take him for his word. And then they read it, and they are fishing for those things, right? You're not just reading a book without somebody speaking in your ears. Like, if you're reading Tom King's Batman, and I'm in your ear the whole time telling you, oh, this is a great character study on how somebody who lives in a world of gods can't handle it, or somebody who deals with monstrosities on a daily or nightly basis. Yeah, no, that's not reasonable. Not for anybody, not even for Batman. If somebody's whispering in my ear, I'm going to be fishing for it. They are not, like, readers. Again, people are going to be up my ass about this. A lot of readers, not all, do not make decisions for themselves. They hear these things, they take it for word, and they fish for those things, right? Because now they are now physically looking for what people are telling them to look for, rather than experiencing the book on its own and reacting to it on their own.
Well, one of the things I will give, I believe why Tom King's writing is successful, is more successful than I appreciate, is that, and I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it because I think I'm right on this, is the more beholden you are to continuity, like I am, the less I like Tom King's writing. If you don't know much about continuity and you don't know a lot about the characters, and you only, you don't know a lot about Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman or the Justice League, you don't really know a lot about the DC universe, you're far more likely to enjoy Heroes in Crisis than if you have any kind of familiarity with continuity and the characters. You're more likely to be forgiven. And I know this from my own experience when I read X-Men. I know nothing about X-Men continuity, very little. So they could screw up the characters. I would have no idea. I've read comic books before that I've liked for Marvel, and other people hate them because they say they got this wrong, and I didn't know that because I'm not familiar with the continuity, and so it didn't bother me, and I enjoyed the story, and I didn't know it violated all these things, and so here I am sounding like that person when I talk about Heroes in Crisis and Batman too. And it's amazing to me that I think the people who defend Tom King, and even the comic retailer that you had a big debate with him on Tom King, who he quite vehemently disagreed with you on the quality of Tom King's writing. There's a lot of people that think like he does, and and all the power to it. I mean, he is bringing a level of prestige to comic books, because when Bill Maher attacked the industry, I mean, DC doesn't care that they piss us all off with Batman 50 by not having a wedding. They made the New York Times. You think they give a shit about 50,000 angry little white male fanboys? They give a shit about us. As long as they got the publicity, they probably had housewives walking into comic book stores for the first time in 20 years buying a comic book. I mean, those are the times in which we live. I mean, that's just the reality. And if they got to make the comic books more depressing to do that, that's what they're going to do, whether we like it or not. That's me being a cynical bastard.
No, I mean, no, you're right. I 100% agree with you. They want reactions, at the end of the day. It's weird because DC is very half-assed, because you would almost think that, I don't want to talk about this too much because it's easy to go off on a tangent. Obviously, Batman Damned #1 had the bat penis, the shadow of the bat wing. It would have been much smarter for DC to keep publishing that book. The fact that DC did not give that book a second printing immediately, like, it would have been so much smarter to do the second printing. If you want to cut out the penis, cut out the penis. Regardless, people were going to buy it. But they lost out big. That book could have easily, between the first two printings, I think, sold 200,000 copies, and it was stuck at 115. That was a terrible business decision. I think DC is just a lot more sensitive right now between, trying to sell and trying to appreciate, the soccer moms who are just trying to buy something for their kid to keep them off their cell phone,
We live in a very, very sensitive times. Corporate powerhouses are so afraid to piss off to do anything wrong. Everyone wants to be so politically correct. Everyone is so ultra sensitive.
Well, yeah.
And that, like you say, that Batarang issue 1 of Batman Damned is a prime example. The level of cowardice by DC of that. I mean, I know Brian, rumor has it, I've heard through different, I think, Bleeding Cool, different gossip circles, that Brian Azzarello was extremely upset with them not publishing, giving that a second printing. And I don't blame him. I mean, he's a creator.
His paycheck.
Yeah, exactly.
It directly affects him.
He puts his heart and soul into something like that. And then to cowardly back down. I mean, if there's one staple in American democracy that you can get away with virtually anything, it's the First Amendment in publications, and certainly in comic books, for God's sake. So you really think you're going to change the world, or you're going to upset the apple cart by doing a second printing of a Batman comic that shows a shadow of a penis?
Right. Well, especially in a mature label, in an adult-oriented line. A lot of people were like, well, do you really need the bat penis? It's like, no, I didn't need it, but like, I had it and you took it away. What was your purpose for taking it away? If your argument is why do we need it? Well, I mean, just objectively, I don't fucking need this book at all. So you might as well just not publish the book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I want the book. I think that, when you really look into the artistic, the artistic side of the book, there was a purpose to the penis, right? So, at the end of the day, it's nuts. And Taylor brings up something excellent that I actually totally forgot about here. DC is also going through some editorial turmoil. Eight employees in high level positions were just let go. That's very true. And
Yeah,
and I,
3% of their workforce. Yeah.
and I believe I saw something about them wanting to let go of even more people.
Yeah.
That does great comment, Taylor. That brings up a lot of really interesting questions about how DC is doing as a company and what direction they're taking things in, or whatever they're reacting to. I mean, it's a really odd situation, that DC
Well,
has itself in, and I think even now, it feels like we were, just tying this into the overall conversation. It feels very 90s. They're literally throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and then they'll change
but
direction based on that. And it almost feels, Marvel 2014, 15, 16, where it was like, we have this thing, we're going to put this book out. If you don't like it, it's a mini series. If you love it, ongoing, let's do it. Like,
Marvel is puking everything out, putting out 90 to 120 different comics a month. DC was at like 90, I think, at the height a couple of years ago, or now they're down. DC might only have about like 50 some under 60 titles a month, which is which is an extreme drop for DC. But they're streamlining their line, and I like to think that DC is just focusing on quality, and this is why. Like we've been sounding a little bit pessimistic here. I still maintain that I think DC is actually streamlining their books. I mean, quite frankly, the Wonder comic books, they're focusing on the titles that are a little bit more popular, and they're focusing, you know, we should have more. We should have 3 Justice League books. It's a popular title. Green Lantern. We should have more than Green Lantern book. We should have more than one Batman book. We should also have another Wonder Woman book too, by the way. And we should have. I mean, so we should have a Wonder Comics line, an all ages line, a more fun line.
right,
And I
yeah.
think that I think we're going to get there. And DC, I think quite frankly, DC is, it concerns me a little bit, but at the same time, I think DC has finally realized they're never going to beat Marvel in sales. Marvel does have the more popular characters. Marvel has won the popular culture. They've won the cinematic war. They make more money on their comic books. They make more money in the movies. DC needs to streamline their comics. They need to focus
Well,
on a new cinematic universe, and then just take it slow and steady wins the race,
I,
and
I
just focus
agree.
on that.
I agree with the majority of that, but in terms of comic book market share, if you pay attention to local retailers, it's because Marvel is strong arming local retailers into buying more units. They're moving more units with all these crazy incentive variant covers, and even discounts. I was talking to my sponsor, and in order to get like a higher discount, on a particular issue, you had to buy some crazy amount of copies. And the only way for you to get certain popular covers that people are likely demanding from their local stores, you have to buy an insane amount of copies just to get to it. And if you look at it, and it's like this at my local comic book store, to be honest, there is a lot more Marvel still sitting on the shelves. So I don't think that Marvel's control over the comic book market is particularly organic. I think it's a lot more, due to the regimented marketing and business decisions that they're making with these local comic book stores, because they're strong arming them.
Well,
And to go off of what you were saying, listen, in concept, I love some of the ideas that DC is moving forward with. I love the 3 Justice Leagues. I love the idea of having the Wonder Comics line and bringing back Young Justice. I love the fact that we're, in detective, and it was happening in action for a while too, that we were embracing the legacy of these characters while moving forward. My issue is with the execution. We have a lot of great ideas that are not being pulled off correctly, because I think it's partly because there's no editorial control. There's nobody really going in here and taking notice to that, and telling these creatives, I like your idea, but let's kind of move it a little bit more this way. Like, let's find some focalization to what you're trying to do here, and just cut off the fatty bits. They're just letting these people run wild. And any good idea can turn bad. Any good idea can turn bad. So as the fact that I can agree with you in the sense that there are a lot of great ideas out there. There are a lot of great creators out there that are working for DC with a lot of great ideas, but in a world where editorial staff is such an important, mechanism to the comic book industry that's not being utilized fully. And I think it's really evident in the lack of control that we're seeing in the storytelling.
Yeah, and at the same time, maybe by streamlining some of it and getting rid of some of it, one can only hope that they've gotten rid of stuff of the stuff that they don't need. And hopefully that the best will rise to the top and not the other way around.
Right.
uh, I guess all we can do is hopefully this will pay some dividends. I know that. I mean, I did a video where I ranted and raved and engaged in all kinds of hyperbole about Bendis, or pardon me, about Dan Didio and Jim Lee and how essential they are and what have you. I've complained about Didio over the years, and but if you get rid of Didio and Jim Lee, who do you replace him with? And I mean, at the end of the day, I, you know, I guess I'm, as much as I love comic books, I love comic books because I got an addiction to comic books. I all I have faith that I do think that we've got some really good titles coming out, and I do think that there's something out there for everyone. And the fact that we can have such a divisive base, and it's very divisive. Comic books is one of the oddest hobbies where, how many hobbies do you know where the most popular comic book, the most popular thing that sells is arguably the most hated online? Isn't that the
Yeah.
oddest thing? How can there be so much
Well, I mean, look at
Tom King hate if his writing is so damn good? Now, you could say it's because of the online, that's just the nature of online whatever, but it's the oddest thing. And some of the best comic books out there aren't selling. I mean, even
well,
Young Justice, or Super Sons. No one's buying Super Sons.
well, I think
It's
I
selling
think it's
20,000 a month.
that's very multifaceted in terms of like why stuff aren't selling based on public opinion or the internet's opinion. I mean, look at, for example, right, Justin Bieber, widely hated. I see more shit on people hating Justin Bieber than I do fangirls obsessing over him. But you know what, the guy is one of the most popular pop artists in the last, I would even beg to say, 2 decades.
Yeah.
It's I don't think it's 100% consistent to just the comic book industry. I think it's any sort of media that people can consume. But in terms of comics, there are a lot of different people that read it for a lot of different reasons, just like people consume different media for a lot of different reasons. There are some people that just read it for the big bombastic storytelling, and to see Superman punch Mongol across the surface of the planet. And those people are really loving Superman and they're really loving Justice League. And then there's guys like me that are nitpicky assholes that are looking for um, these very literary these very literary kind of
Well, we want the themes, the philosophies. We want we're more nitpicky. I mean,
yeah, like there are people like me who, like, I want the complex storytelling, but I also want a little bit of that, love and homage to the history of the medium. I Let's be real, man. I'm nitpicky and I ask for a lot out of my comic books. I really do. Because not only do I want, and the perfect example for me right now is Tomasi in Detective Comics. I'm getting very complex story with this very genre oriented plot, moving towards a mystery, but also I'm getting an adventure. But also Tomasi is paying a lot of homage to the history of the character and what makes him so great, what makes him so um, formidable throughout history. And I'm getting all of that, but it is a big ask, especially in like a periodical medium of storytelling. Um, so I can acknowledge that, but at the same time, that's what I'm looking for in a comic, and it's 100% different than what a lot of other people are looking for.
yeah. And overall, I have to. I don't know. I have to say, overall, I think there's something for every one of the tones that we've talked about. Uh, I think there's a tone. There's a tone there in the DC universe for it. Overall, I think that I don't know if DC can please all of us. I think they are trying. They're certainly trying. I think they're trying to. Uh, they're not taking as long as they used to change tone. I mean, they did an about face with Doomsday Clock. I think relatively quickly. They've done an about face. I think even in the direction of some of their titles, even the Wonder Comics line. I think even with Superman and the Action Comics, I get a feeling that they've maybe changed the plot line a little bit there in terms of the direction. I
Oh
still
yeah.
think that they're going to change things with John Kent and his aging up, aging down. I wonder what their plan is there. They might even have, I still say we might have a young Jonathan Kent join the Legion of Superheroes. That 7-year time jump. Maybe he spent time in the future in the Legion of Superheroes, and we'll have a young Jonathan Kent in the 31st century. Who knows? So, I mean, we can hold out some hope here. So let's not assume that all is lost, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I mean, yeah, I love the fact that there are a lot of diverse options out there in comics. Like if all things were going well, the Black Label line would be up and running, and I'd get those mature, artistic, literary stories. We have the Detective Comics. We get amazing, kind of like one-off stories, like Man and Superman that came out this week. You
yeah,
know,
that's great.
but
I
like
love that.
yeah, and we have the 3 Justice League books that are some, like, I would say Justice League and Odyssey and Justice League Odyssey are a little bit more similar in tone, but then we
Yeah,
get the contrast with Justice League Dark, so on and so forth. You get what I'm saying?
yeah,
My issue again is just the execution. I like a lot of the concepts. I love that DC's publishing a young readers line. I love that we're getting the Wonder Comics line. I love that we have the regular DC universe, and I love that at the same time we can have something dark and gritty running alongside something as hopeful and as adventurous as like Young Justice. But
yeah.
but for me, my issue is they are biting off more than they can chew right now. We should have built up to this point so that each of these books or each of these kind of subsections of titles can succeed.
Mhm.
you know that's the problem. I love the idea. I love the fact that there's a little bit of something for everybody, but they just threw it. They just like it's like prison food. They just took it, splattered it on the tray, and it went everywhere.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They should have taken their time and released all of these things separately and waited for them to coalesce, in the sense that they became organic stories that weren't just because. That's the big problem for me right now, is like, this is something that could be great,
Mhm.
it could be fantastic, and it's just not something they followed through really well.
And I will add to that too, though, that I collect virtually, with the exception of Batgirl, that I buy most all DC titles, and I have to admit that if a person does not read all the DC titles, the vast majority of the things that I bitch about,
Mhm.
most people aren't even aware of. You can absolutely read Young Justice and enjoy it and not be bothered by the continuity glitches. If you're not, why would a continuity glitch bother you if you're not aware that it exists? I mean, and so I think that it's important. I think, especially since comic books are expensive, the vast majority of people who get into comics don't collect all of them. The vast majority of people who collect a DC comic don't collect all the DC comics.
Right.
And so, as long as each individual line, a story arc, is cohesive and is told well, it can still sell well, and it can still be well. And but but that but that leads into more of our topic, and that is that even looking at the individual arcs themselves, and particularly when you look at Batman, the tone is sometimes just a relentless amount of darkness,
Yeah.
and or at least darker themes. And you
Yeah.
know I think that I still say that you got to reel them in a little bit, and even Bendis. And I know that I'm so freaking hit and miss, and and I put my foot in my mouth so many times with Bendis because I keep wanting to love his shit, and then I end up having to eat my words because he does something that pisses me off.
Yeah.
And I'm still that way. He tells such a long story, and even with Young Justice under Bendis now, it looks like we're 2 issues in, and already in the second issue, it looks like it's going to be another 12-issue story, and we're going to go nowhere. Like I just really wish that they would just tighten up their stories a little bit more and be a little bit more mindful that even at $3.99, comic books are expensive, and
Oh yeah.
they got to tighten these stories up a little bit more because
Well, I mean,
it's
I mean, it might be the same for you. I don't know. I mean, you have a wife and a child, but like, I spend more on comic books every month than I do on my utilities every month. Like it's crazy, and that's with various discounts that I get from my sponsor or another store. It's nuts. And on the topic of Young Justice in particular, plug. I just did a review of it where you will have a chance to win a free copy of Young Justice #1. Now that #2's out, you can catch up. But I actually, little spoiler to that, I recommended it to new readers because, to be honest, most of the questions that I had revolved around the characters and how these characters are here and how they are the way they are based on where continuity is right now. And that's not something that's going to bog you down. And I talk a little bit more about that there. So, if you guys, whenever you guys, or when we're done here, feel free to go check that out. You have a chance to win a copy of Young Justice #1 and Invaders #1. So, but going off of that, I did want to bring up for you guys. I've been giving a lot of comic books away on my Comics Insider videos, and I don't know if I said this already for that one. Make sure you do it before Sunday, just to get that engagement going. I did want to reward the people that come by and watch these live streams. So, in honor of our conversation, I actually want to switch it up a little bit. For those of you watching live that are taking the time to join us right now, I'm giving you guys the opportunity to get a free copy of Shazam #1 digitally. So one of the things that I want to pose in the chat, and the whoever comes up with the best comment, judged by myself and Boom, will win a free copy of Shazam #1. You can contact me through Twitter, send me a DM, and I'll give you that digital code. What we want to know is, where would you like to see the DC universe going? And I know this is a very general question. You can answer this, as a large standing question, or you can keep it kind of short and succinct. But whoever gives us the best answer as to where they would like to see the DC universe go from here, could be story, could be tonality, could be whatever. Let us know in the live chat right now, and the winner, judged by myself and Boom, will win a free copy of Shazam #1. Now, for those of you who are watching this later as a recording, or those of you who are watching now and want to come back in, check it out again. Both of Boom and I's Twitter links are in the description below. Tweet at both of us with what your favorite part of the stream is tonight. Was it a certain conversation? Was it me flipping out and being an asshole? What was it? Was it something someone else said? Tweet at us, let us know, send us a screenshot that you're subscribed to both channels, and we will give you a free copy of the Immortal Hulk, the Best Defense Edition. Now, just to talk about this briefly so that people know what they're getting, I know you have been championing the Immortal Hulk a lot. This is one of my favorite series coming out of Marvel right now. Do you want to just very briefly give them an idea of what the Immortal Hulk Best Defense #1 plays about?
The Immortal Best Defense #1. I believe that's actually one of 4 one-shots leading into the Defenders, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually it's not the Immortal Hulk series proper,
mm-hmm.
but it's
written by the same writer, Al Ewing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the Immortal Hulk. Immortal Hulk was my best comic book of 2018, and I'm a DC guy, and I had to give it to Marvel. It was the best comic book of 2018. Al Ewing, I think, is arguably, I think he's the hottest writer right now in terms of just telling really great self-contained stories and in a larger arc, and he nails the Hulk, man. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoying Immortal Hulk, and yeah, whenever you, there's no way you should ever pass up a free digital code for anything Immortal Hulk.
No, yeah, it's been a spectacular book from start to finish, or the main series at least. I know for me, I didn't go into this being a Hulk fan. To be quite honest, I couldn't really care about Hulk any less. And I'm walking out of this wanting to know more and more and more about the character and the legacy. So, definitely not a bad book.
And
Uh,
I should say one thing about Immortal Hulk too. The standard covers are the Alex Ross covers. They're selling out. And the second printings of Immortal Hulk when they come out are not Alex Ross covers. And they're selling out. It's hard to find even the standard covers of Immortal Hulk on the stands, which is irregular for Marvel Comics because they usually overprint. They're not overprinting the first printings of Immortal Hulk. You're actually, as a speculator and as a collector, buy Immortal Hulk. Number one, you're actually getting a good story, and in actual fact, Marvel's doing what it should be doing, and that is not. I kind of like when they don't overprint. You know, it's legitimate hype. It's not overhype.
right.
It's not a predatory marketing practice for once. They're not overprinting. It's not overhype. It's a fantastic tale, and the art's fantastic. And if you're gonna buy 2 issues of the same comic book, make it Immortal Hulk because the speculator market. Alex Ross is back on his A game. Along, he's doing the covers for Captain America as well. I mean, I tell you, it's a great time to buy Alex Ross covers, and on Immortal Hulk along with Captain America is the way to go.
Yeah. No, it's been a spectacular story, and it's something that I could never even fathom to come out of a Hulk title. Just the level of depth that they're going into, and even the subject matter that Al Ewing is playing with. So definitely a great title that Marvel's putting out right now. So if you guys want to win a copy, don't forget, make sure you subscribe to both my channel, Comic Boom's channel, and tweet at both of us. Let us know what your favorite part of this stream and this discussion was, and we will pick the winner. And don't forget, if you guys want to win a copy of Shazam #1, who are watching this live, let us know in the chat where you want to see DC go from here. And again, by the end of the stream, Comic Boom and I will decide the winner, and whoever that will get a free digital copy. But plugs away, moving over on. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that, and it was brought up briefly by Taylor, about all the different miniseries. We're getting a couple characters right now in the DC universe, namely Green Lantern, Shazam, Martian Manhunter, and if I forget anything, let me know, who are, uh, who have fairly decent sized fan bases that are just getting these minis and maxi series. Their DC isn't giving them guaranteed ongoings. And I wanted to know, like, what you made of that. Is this again another case of DC testing the waters to see what they can do with these characters, or what type of stories they want to see?
Well, I think that's what it is. I actually think I very much disagree with their choice of creators on some of these titles, to be honest with you. Marv Wolfman, I love Marv Wolfman, and I particularly love his Man and Superman, and he talks, and I definitely want to give this a plug. You already plugged it. But Marv Wolfman also, he wrote Raven. He's written 2 Raven miniseries already, and he just finished the 12th issue of a 12th issue Raven story mini maxi series, and it hasn't sold well. It hasn't really done that well. But I think DC gave it to him because he's Marv Wolfman, and because of the Titans TV show. So I can understand that, even though it hasn't sold well. Martian Manhunter, Steve Orlando is a writer that whatever he writes just plain doesn't sell. I don't know why they keep giving the guy work. And I'm just talking as a business person.
Right.
The guy consistently writes stories that don't sell. I don't know why they keep giving this guy work. I just don't get it. And he's also, they've given him Electric Warrior too. Electric Warrior and Martian Manhunter, both Steve Orlando written, and both just not really hitting it out of the park. So I'm a little bit baffled. If they're going to be, I think that they're hoping for another repeat of Tom King, right? Tom King's Mr. Miracle was a big surprise. It caught people off guard, and it was a pleasant surprise. And I think they're really hoping that, they want to give a writer it's every writer's dream to be able to to take an obscure character and do something fantastic with it, like Tom King did with Mr. Miracle, right? And now Tom King is hinting. He hinted that one of his next character that he's going to do a maxi series for is actually in Heroes in Crisis #5,
Oh
and
God.
rumor has it that it's going to be Adam Strange. I think
Oh
that's the
God.
going. So that. But anyways, whether or not that's true, um, I like maxi series. I love the fact that DC should be experimenting like that. They should say, look, go to a writer and say, look, pick a random whatever writer who wants to make a mark and say, look, we're gonna give you Blue Beetle. We'll give you 6 issues. Do something off the wall with it. I like that. I don't mind that type of experimenting. Here, take Ambush Bug. Do something crazy with him and put
Right.
him on Earth 32 or something, or I don't know. Just I don't mind that, but when you give it to somebody with a proven failed track record, that's what pisses me off.
Well,
Like,
and not to mention, you got to know what characters you can really, go outside the box with. Guys like, for example, we bring this up a lot. Batman has 80 years of popular culture and pre-established history, whereas you have characters like Ambush Bug who don't. So
yeah,
there are characters like that you can play with and manipulate and make your own character. I
yeah,
just don't think DC really gets a grip on what characters they can do that with. They just want to do that thing. They want to, they want to make the next Mr. Miracle, the next Vision, the next artsy, no-name character that gets nominated for Eisners.
yeah. No, one of the things that always surprised me, and it's a related topic, is I think DC has not taken full advantage of the multiversity, Grant Morrison's multiversity, and all the 52 worlds, all those different Earths with all those different characters and different versions of the Justice League, and they even have they even had arguably a group of like Marvel Comics characters in one of their Earths. I really think they should have taken it more, and even with the Freedom Fighters, I was very disappointed with Freedom Fighters with Vendetti. Not so much the story, but just how it should be on it is on a different Earth, but it should have been more like Grant Morrison's. It just should have been more over the top. It should have been more of a. Uh, it was just by the numbers. It was generic. They need something more that pops. I think they should be taking more chances, not less, and especially if they're going to streamline their titles a little bit more. I would like. I think there's so much potential in the DC universe, and I think for the most part they're really really playing it safe, and they I don't know. It makes me wonder that they have to broaden their talent a little bit more and maybe get more different just more talent in, because I think that the editors need to start making some different choices. I think in terms of the teams that they're putting on these titles.
No, I agree. It's the problem that they want to take chances, but they don't quite know who or what to take chances with. Um, and that's one of the biggest issues. What the thing that just makes me flabbergasted is the fact that, again, like you, and I'm going to be more specific to the Elseworlds. I know Black Label's kind of taken over
Oh,
that
I
position.
love Elseworlds. Yeah,
Yeah, but like we're not taking advantage of Elseworlds.
yeah,
We haven't seen an Earth 1 book since what? Wonder Woman Earth 1 Volume 2?
yeah. That's
Why
right.
are we not taking advantage of that? For generally speaking, those books are pretty popular, and I know that they're a little bit more, laborious and passion projects, but you're focusing on all these other things in continuity with people who want to be experimental. Let them have an Earth 1 book. Let them have an Elseworlds book to do that crazy stuff. You know, you put the guys like Tomasi on Detective who are just knocking it out of the park. By the way, for those of you who are watching, if you're not buying Detective Comics right now, we can't be friends. We can't be
Yeah,
friends. That book is so goddamn good. And it's because Tomasi is acknowledging the fact that we're in continuity, but is also integrating his own writing style and his own stylistic choices into the character, the
yeah,
story, where we're choosing to go with the narrative. It's fantastic. But again, he realizes that he's in continuity and he knows what he can and cannot do. and that helps to elevate what he's doing in the position that he's in. Whereas you have guys like, oh God, I just picked this up. Finally, you have guys like Gabriel Hardman who can really go outside the box in Green Lantern Earth 1. And it's because it's an Earth 1 title. So then that's when you can make those really character defying moves, you know, to see what people like. And you know what? I haven't met a single person that didn't like this book. You know why? Because it stays true at parts to the character, but also takes those risks, but has the room to take those risks because it's not in continuity. You have no one to upset. Because at the end of the day, if you're like, wow, this isn't consistent with the mythology of the Green Lanterns or the overall space mythology, you know, DC Cosmic, it's not in continuity. Shouldn't have to bother you, you know?
I reviewed that, and it's really good, and it does deviate from the Green Lantern mythology of the mainstream DC universe, and it tells its own sort of mythology, and it's really good. It's really good, and it's a self-contained story, and I really hope they expand on that. That's another sort of line where, you know, that every single one of those lines, most of them I think were when we're on the New York Times best-selling list, at least when the New York Times did have graphic novels on the best-selling list. I don't know if they do that anymore at the New York Times. I don't think they do, but no, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know if there's an overall. I know there's a slight maybe downturn in the sale of comics overall, but it is a little bit disconcerting that it still bothers me a little bit that more professionals didn't come to the defense of the comic book industry when Bill Maher took his comedy with a grain of salt. Don't get me wrong. Like I wasn't that offended. I laughed. I find him funny, but it still was a little bit, it was amazing to me. It was depressing to me how generally silent the comic book industry was to the whole thing and didn't really, you know, it's like people are embarrassed. Everybody was embarrassed to sort of say, you know, because if you come to the defense of comic books, that must mean you read comic books.
Well, you know, I kind of disagree with that because like we're chatting about this a little bit earlier. I didn't say anything about it because it would give Bill Maher the rise and the publicity that he wanted. At the end of the day, I think, you know, silence is the only thing that could hurt Bill Maher. You know, all the angry people, God, his viewership spikes were angry comic book fans trying to let him know that they pissed him off. At the end of the day, that extra viewership gives him money. So for me personally, like I didn't acknowledge it on YouTube. I didn't acknowledge it on my Twitter. I didn't acknowledge it on anything because I knew that if I did that, it's exactly what he wanted. He wanted the publicity because you know what, especially in television or in visual media, there is no bad publicity.
Well, I don't, that's a legitimate point of view. I just, on the other hand, if a hobby is worth having, it's worth defending. And it's not about Bill Maher. I give a rat's ass whether I give more publicity to Bill Maher. If if I love this hobby and somebody's going to insult it, and again, I actually did a little bit of a rant on it. I basically it was water off a duck's back, but I'd be lying if it said it didn't. That I wasn't self-conscious of it. I was a little self-conscious of it, and it did sort of. I felt a little bit of resentment hearing it as if somehow, I mean, he really was profoundly ignorant. And what was depressing about it is, and my comment was 99% of people believe like Bill Maher. They really know nothing about comic books. Right. They really do think comic books are for kids. They've got no idea he has no idea that comics have not been written for children for 30, 40 years. Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time since comic books were actually written for children. I mean, you actually it's hard to find a comic book written for a child when you go into a comic book shop. You got to go to a special part of the store for a children's comic because usually, you know, there's that few of them. And, you know, anyways, I guess the more I talk, I'm just going to end up ranting. So I'll shut up now. But no, I mean, it irritates me.
You make a good point. At my university, and again, it's a fairly highly accredited university. UConn's like University of Connecticut. UConn is like top 30 public universities in the country. They have a graphic novel course. Mind you, it's an honors course only. not even like the normal college student can take that class because it's an honors level course. So if you can't wrap your head around the fact that there are graphic novels and a majority of comic books that are written towards a more mature or adult audience, there's like that just makes you ignorant. And there is that onset of movie fans that think they know everything about comics,
Yeah,
and that's always going to be a thing, especially with the massive global communication network that is the internet.
yeah.
But
Well,
like,
we live in a day and age where when a kid, there's something odd when a kid tells me, or my mother tells me about his kid, that, oh my God, he just loves Spider-Man, only to discover that the kid's never read a Spider-Man comic book,
mhm.
but he's the best Spider-Man fan ever, and all he's done is watch a cartoon. Like, I just find that so odd. You've never read a Spider-Man comic, yet you consider yourself the best Spider-Man fan in the world. I mean, I get it, and I'm glad, because there's different mediums for this stuff. I get it, but that's just comic books, unfortunately, really are. They're just not. There's kind of a, I hate to say it, but somewhat of a dying medium.
No, I mean, it has its moments, and the only ones that get like that big, you know, um, like high concentration publicity are the ones that are either saying something incredibly profound, or are pretending to say something incredibly profound, i.e. Batman. But I think some of it's starting to wear off, because when I was looking at the sales, 13 issues of Batman this year sold under 100,000 copies. That's
Yeah.
more than half. And a good majority of them, besides Batman issue 50, sold, I think, like the next peak was like 135, which is like fine sales for Batman. But when, like, besides a big spectacle issue, your peak is 135, and more than half your Batman books are selling under 100K, it's not so hot.
Yeah.
That's not so hot. And yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to it. I think some people are starting to understand that, and there will always be the people that don't, or the people that just straight up disagree. Like my sponsor, Pete, he's a very intelligent guy. I can't say he's not. The argument we had, although we completely disagree, and to be quite frank, I don't understand why he likes Tom King's Batman as much as he does. He is an intelligent human being with intelligent opinions on books. So that's all there is to it. Uh,
Mhm.
so uh, so Moki Dude ask, what do they teach? If they're teaching pretentious shit like Mouse, then I don't believe it's worth taking. Well, I mean, you realize to get like an accredited graphic novel class going, there are some compromises you have to make. And in the education system, Mouse is looked at as, a high concept, profound, you know,
Oh,
voice.
that's the yeah. That's the You're talking about the Pulitzer Prize winning Moz.
Yeah. He was like, he thinks it's too pretentious. I mean, also, Samoki Dude, if we were to be real about it, people could say Watchmen was pretentious. But they also teach Watchmen in that class. So I think you're kind of being subjective here. But regardless, it doesn't mean it's not worth taking, because there are compromises that I'm sure that class had to make to even be put on the docket.
Well,
One being putting something like Mouse, that's Mouse or Moz, however you want to pronounce it, being a widely recognized book on there.
well, Peter David made that comment, and it's so true, that the moment, if you just look at art, adults can collect high concept art, and you could also, people can buy literature and read the words, and you can buy, high concept literature, and yet the minute you combine art and literature, it's called a comic book. Suddenly, that's for children.
Yep.
I mean, it's just there's a hypocrisy there that's so obvious, and yet, you know, it's it's, one could easily criticize any sports by saying, well, any sport you play is a glorified children's sport. It's just for adults. I mean, what's football? People, a bunch of grown adults throwing a ball around. I mean, isn't that exactly what children do? I mean, it's the criticism of comic books is really asinine when you stop and think about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. Samoki also says that he thinks Moore is a more integral storyteller. Spiegelman just wrote a good book and thinks he knows how to make good comics. I mean, arguably anybody that writes anything that hits is probably going to think that they make good comics. If I wrote a book and I sold 100,000 copies, I'm going to think that I'm a great storyteller regardless. So I don't think that's something you can really blame on Spiegelman. Not to mention, there is a fundamental lack of representation that Mouse was able to provide to the industry. That is definitely a big part of why that book succeeds and the perspective that it speaks from. So, I mean, I guess, as politely as I can say, I think you're being incredibly subjective and biased to the fact that you like Alan Moore. Don't get me wrong, I love Alan Moore, arguably the best storyteller comics has ever seen. Again, arguably, but I think the statement that you're making there is just entirely based off of bias. But with that out of the way, I so the one thing I want to ask you, Boom, where do you see DC going from here? From this point on, where do you think the DC universe is going to be going in terms of its publishing? And does that align with what you hope it's going to do? What do you want it to do?
Well, where do I see it going? And now this is blind speculation, and this is premised on my own sort of hopeful, wishful thinking. But because GC they've shifted. Clearly, there's been an editorial shift. There's been a change in storylines. There's been a change in tone, and that's just been over the last 2 years. So who's to say it won't change again? They've had a 3% drop in their workforce. They let some people go. Clearly, something is happening at DC. We're not sure what the hell that is. But where do I think it's going? Based upon what I see now, I'm here I go again. I choose to be optimistic. I really do think that I think they are. I think that they're doing what they need to do. They're trying to please both camps, and I think that they're doing a reasonably competent job right now, notwithstanding some storytelling hiccups. They've got. I like the direction of Justice League. I think it's heading toward an epic adventure. I think Snyder's doing a good job. Even though I don't like Tom King, he's catering to a specific market and he's selling the comic books. So, I don't have to like it for me to acknowledge that it's selling well. The Wonder Comics, I love the concept. I don't mind Young Justice, Naomi, the Wonder Twins is coming out. These all have potential. I think they got their eggs in different baskets. They're streamlining it. They're streamlining their talent. I like the direction of Aquaman, of Justice League Dark, Grant Morrison on Green Lantern. I love the fact that after 10 years of being that they actually published Marv Wolfman's Man and Superman. I love that
years.
they did that. I mean, this is overall, and they published Super Sons. They put Tomasi on Detective. I think that they're making decisions quicker. I think they're correcting mistakes that they're making quicker. I hope. I'm thinking that's what happened with Tomasi. I think they tried to save face. I think they tried to make a quick adjustment to please the fans. I think that's a good sign, not necessarily a bad one. And it's an acknowledgement of a truth on their part, however painful. They're course correcting a little bit, and I note that even Cover Up's final issue, Bendis's 6-issue series cover, that's not going to go for 12 issues. I think they put a kibosh on that after 6. That's the final issue 6. I think the bloom is off Bendis's rose, and I think he's got to step up to the plate. I think he's under a lot more pressure than he would care to admit. And overall, I think we're heading in a positive direction. What do you think?
See, for me, I know we've talked about how I think Bendis has way too many plates spinning. I can honestly say I think that by the time he came to DC, I think everything he has coming out right now for Jinx World was already written. I think that he wanted Marvel to publish it. Part of the reason why he might have come over is Marvel said no, and he just brought it over to DC. I think those stories are done. I think they've been done. And so I'm hoping that the fact that the books don't sell super well, they're not doing well critically. Hopefully DC gets a little bit of an inkling and starts to give him a little bit of editorial pushback. In terms of the direction of DC, I think they're going to continue to throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. If Heroes in Crisis ends up bottoming out. They're totally going to go for the more lighter hearted feel. I think they're going to embrace the Wonder Comics line even more and things of that nature. You know, Man and Superman already sold out as far as I'm aware. And it again is a lot more of an embrace of you know the history of the character, the adventure, and just how this character has been interpreted throughout the medium. Um, so I think that's a big possibility. I don't see anything really crazy, dark, and depressing. I think it generally DC is going to be pushing towards a lighter tone, especially with all the Justice League titles. You know, Scott Snyder is kind of harping on, or at least trying to harp on these very Silver Age storytelling sensibilities. So I think that's where I see it going. In terms of where I want it to go, and Koala kind of begins to echo part of my sentiment. Koala says, "I think people say yes too much to Bendis. I think editorial needs to get more involved. I think that we need to embrace the fact that these creators have these ideas, but we need to position them in the right places so that they can succeed and cut off the fat." I think we've talked about this many times, how I think that one of Rebirth's strengths was that they were able to tell these big creative stories and bring these characters into new places while also acknowledging that they take place in a continuity where other things and other stories exist. And that's all there is to it. I like the idea of what they're doing. I want them to execute it better and clean it up. That's really all that is. You know, I'm not upset with people taking, you know, creative changes into their own hands, because if that never happened, we wouldn't have gotten some of the biggest and best stories that this medium has ever seen. Also, as a side note, I love how like every time I rant, you change your hat. We've got We've gone from like Captain Marvel to Wonder Woman to Batman, or at least those are the three that I've noticed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I got
Um,
Avengers coming up here, so
oh boy. Um, but yeah, you know, I think the idea behind it is great. I just hope that DC can follow through on the execution and start paying a little bit more attention. I hope that they can start really focusing in on all of these different branches and imprints and work on them all individually before they throw everything at us, so that they can all succeed organically, that they can all kind of hook in their niche of readers that they're trying to hook in, and even maybe pull in people who never thought that they'd be interested in stuff like that. At the end of the day, I want comics to do well. I want sales to be good, and I want a thriving medium where I can enjoy what I'm reading. You know, right now, and I guess this is a good segue. A lot of stuff that I'm reading or enjoying are the stuff that doesn't sell as well, unfortunately, because they don't have the hype behind it. And so going into that, one of the things that I wanted to ask, especially for those watching, Boom, what are some books that DC is publishing right now that you are enjoying most?
um, wow. Well, actually, the Batman Detective was a huge surprise for me. That really caught me off guard. Batman Detective. So Batman Detective, I'm really enjoying, but that's also a fairly popular one. I'm really enjoying that. The other ones, it's probably easier for me just because I got most of them here. Uh, the Man and Superman is really good. Grant Morrison's Green Lantern, I'm really enjoying. When the first two issues came out, I had some trepidation, but you know, it really hooked me. By the third issue of Grant Morrison's Green Lantern, when it's him and God there at Godlike, it's starting to be a really good story, and I'm really enjoying it with Liam Sharp's art. Grant Morrison's Green Lantern is just it's really good, and the latest issue of Justice League, I actually spent, if you can believe this, I read Justice League by Snyder is such a convoluted series of issues. I spent about 7 hours reading the over just three issues of issues 15, 16, and the Justice League Annual, and reading and putting together a cohesive narrative. I did a 25-minute video of it, and even though the video is only 25 minutes, I actually spent 7 hours of prep time doing that video, if you can believe that. You'd never tell by listening to the video that that's how long it took. But it
Mhm.
took me that long to get a handle on it. And now that I got a handle on the story, it's huge. It's epic. It's awesome. I don't know how many people would be willing to put that much effort into it as I did to try to get a handle on it. But then again, I freely admit maybe I'm just getting old and my memory is going really bad. But uh, yeah, that's probably it. I don't know what are your favorite DC titles? Oh, Silencer. I have to give a shout out to the last issue of Silencer. I like the finally we get an origin story for Silencer, issue 13. That's really good. That's always one that I read off the top of the chart too. As I'm impressed with Silencer, the New Age for Heroes, the only title I like out of that.
For me, I'm going to start with the most obvious answer. Detective Comics is my favorite book that DC is publishing right now. And I have a couple of issues here. Those of you who have been watching me for any extended period of time, let's see if my camera wants to focus. You all know that if a Batman book was bad, I would criticize it more than I criticize any other book. And this has been phenomenal. It embraces the history of the character and isn't afraid to pull things in a new direction. The voicing of Batman himself is perfect to a T. Exactly, how as someone who is a, I don't want to say like a scholar because that sounds pompous, but as someone who is a fanatic of the character, it feels right and cohesive. The reactions, just the way that Tomasi characterizes Batman in the environment, along with the supporting characters, is perfect. His relationship with Alfred, his relationship with Leslie in those two issues, man, almost brought me to tears. The artwork is great. I think the first issue, it might be like my favorite thing Doug Monk has ever done. Or Monkey, I'm sorry, I might be butchering his name. Um, Phenomenal series. It's the lead up to Detective Comics 1000, which I know a lot of you are going to buy, whether or not you're buying the series. Trust me, it's worth it to buy this lead up, and it'll probably be worth it to buy it after because Tomasi is knocking it out of the park. He loves the character. He knows the character. He knows the world, and he's executing it perfectly.
I just want to add. I want to add your comment about Detective Comics. I love the format that that Peter Tomasi has chosen to tell the story of Detective Comics. It might be a little bit cliche, but he's using a scavenger hunt sort of storytelling method, where Batman's on a scavenger hunt. Now, I'm not always a huge fan of a scavenger hunt story, but it's perfect for Batman because it's leading into his tribute issue of 1000. He's sort of looking. He's treasure hunting. He's going to different teachers that have trained him over the years that made him Batman. Somebody's killing them off. And by doing so, we're learning more about Batman's past. We're getting reminded of who Batman is, his backstory, what he loves, what he doesn't, his power set, his genius, his detective skills. All of it's all rolled in and wrapped into it. It's a perfect way to tell a story leading into 1000. And you're absolutely right in the rest of what you say about it.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. I can't recommend it enough. As an old Batman fan, or I would recommend this deeply because you will feel so gratified for all of the love and all of the time you've put into the character. But if you're new, it gives you everything you need to love the character. Like everybody knows from the beginning, they start off by giving a little bit of panel time to Batman's origin and how heavily involved his entire history is going to be with this story. We are seeing little bits and pieces from everywhere. We have this mystery that is just building and boiling that I think is probably going to come to a climax at Detective 1000. It's just such cohesive, beautiful storytelling. I'm going to stop at that because I could keep rambling about this title forever. And Taylor Pector brings up he's really warmed up to Morrison's Green Lantern. Frankly, I really enjoyed the first issue. Second issue, I enjoyed not as much. Third issue was crazy. Fourth issue, I'm really excited to read because I've heard great things. I'm loving Liam Sharp's art. I think that he's constantly kind of changing and adjusting each issue to what he thinks really exemplifies this space odyssey that Morrison's telling. In no way whatsoever is this the space cop procedural that he said he was telling, but I'm really okay with it because what he's doing is playing to his strengths, and he's really evolving the scope of DC Cosmic to a level that is almost it's almost Star Wars, like he's pulling out these very Morrison-y things that the normal person wouldn't think of. Like one of the things in the first issue, he brings up like microwave lanterns and an electromagnet lanterns, and most people thought they were colors on the spectrum. They weren't. They were species made out of these different wavelengths, waveforms of light, and like that's not something you'd ever think of. But at the end of the day, you know, especially in a fictional world, we could never begin to imagine what's out there. We could never begin to imagine what's already been established. So I think he's taking such a creative and open-minded approach as he normally does. I think some of the character choices he's making with Hal are a little bit odd, but at the end of the day, the story's been really, really interesting. Um, Liam Sharp on art with Steve Oliff, I believe, doing colors, and the colors just give
Yeah,
it this vintage feel. I dig it. I dig the hell out of it.
yeah, no, it's beautiful.
So I can totally agree with you, Taylor. What's that you're holding up there?
What's Green Lantern?
Oh, number 4.
Number 4, yeah. And I
Uh,
love the fact that we have red instead of, we don't always need to have green on the cover. I like that. Just because it's called Green Lantern doesn't mean it always has to be green. One of the things that always annoyed me about all the long Vendetti run, and this isn't Vendetti's fault, but it was just how many years did we go with Green Lantern, and they're just every single cover just seemed to blend into the next. Every single Green Lantern cover for years looked identical to every other Green Lantern cover because it was just a bunch of Green Lanterns on the same page shooting their. It was just, you know. Anyways, it's a little bit of a rant.
No, 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 no. That's I totally get that. Samoki Dude says he's loving John's Shazam. I haven't read the second issue yet, not gonna lie. I've been fairly behind, but the first issue honestly was such a breath of fresh air. I talked, I think even with you, Boom, like my
Yeah,
few very minimal problems with the book in terms of it being a little bit too on the nose and in
yeah,
some of the characterization of the children and some of the dialogue. But I think that it's John's again kind of harking back to the origins of the character, you know, and where his origins took place in you know time and in the history of the DC universe. The story though is what excites me most. The
yeah,
plot that he's poking at and the wildly adventurous um, direction that he seems to be going with, along with that mystery, that last page reveal on issue 1. And not to mention Dale Eaglesham on art, knocking
yeah,
it out of the park.
yeah. No,
I think it's excellent. I'm really excited to read the second issue, and I couldn't agree with you more, Samoki Dude. Taylor Pector, Hawkman and Wildstorm are my favorite series right now. Detective has been great ever since Tomasi came on. I could totally agree with that. I know I'm the only one here that is loving Bendis's Action Comics. Yeah, I mean, you know, we all have different
he's
tastes.
not the only one. I don't mind Action Com. I don't mind Bendis's Superman. I don't mind. I still say Superman and Action are good. I think the stories are building up to something. Look, I have issues with how he writes Lois and Clark's relationship and the dialogues, but I can't fault. I think the plot lines. I think we're heading to somewhere in terms of plot. I think it's really good. It's just the execution and the dialogue sometimes leave me shaking my head.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
you and I disagree on that, but
Yeah, I mean, you know, Taylor and you both know my feelings on his Superman, but you know, to each their own. One thing I did want to highlight, he brings up Hawkman. Hawkman has been phenomenal. It
oh
is
yeah,
it is selling egregiously under what I think it should be. I can't recommend it enough. If you guys know nothing about Hawkman, start from issue 1. You know, it's literally an arc ago. The trade's probably coming out soon. Maybe it already came out. I don't know. I've been picking it up every month. For me, you know, I had a very basic understanding of who the character was and a little bit about his history, and I went into this, and Venditti does an excellent job at marrying that to this new directionality. You know, he's one of those guys that, again, the reason I love Venditti so much is because he's masterful at taking what has already existed. We are acknowledging the character's history and we are molding it into something more modern, more contemporary, and taking it in a new direction that complements that. That's
yeah,
what makes the writers that do their jobs in continuity so great, is being able to accomplish that because it is such a big feat. The art by Brian Hitch is fantastic, and one of the great things is I love that Venditti lets Brian Hitch do his thing. And if you notice, just like you know most of his other big titles, every issue we get to see like a city or something being destroyed, and Brian Hitch artistically, visually knocks that out of the park. But on a side story, I think we're giving a lot of purpose to the character of Carter Hall. We are making him a little bit more complex than this savage character that is just rearing to fight, and it's all very very organic. It doesn't feel like it's something out of left field, and
yeah,
it feels like it's consistent with you know the history of the character. It's just fantastic, and I love the storytelling. I think that we're doing something really expansive that involves obviously Carter Hall, Hawkman, but the entire DC universe, and I love it. I think that um, given that this book gets to continue, I think Venditti will be to Hawkman like what Jeff Johns was to Green Lantern, and like mark my words, if he's
I,
given
I
time.
I think that's right, and I think that I think he's done in 7 issues as equal a job to Hawkman as Jeff Johns ever did to Hawkman, and I enjoyed Jeff Johns' Hawkman. I also think that I've never been on the Venditti. I've never particularly been a huge fan of Venditti. Full disclosure, up until Hawkman, I was not a huge fan of his Green Lantern run. And for the first time, Venditti I actually got the feels on the Krypton issue with Hawkman meeting his Kryptonian self.
Deeply
That actually
existential.
there was some emotion in that comic that I actually for the first time I began to sort of feel. I actually felt the sense of the loss of Krypton more in a Hawkman comic than I ever did in a Superman comic in a
Yep.
long time. Anyway, I've had and so that the fact that he was able to pull that off, heightened of course by Brian Hitch's great art, was definitely a compliment. And I just want to throw out there too that I really like how DC is really shaking it up with the Hawkman mythology, because we got wonderfully done by Venditti in the pages of Hawkman about Carter Hall, but also Scott Snyder in the pages of Justice League, his explanation for why Shiera Hall and Kendra Saunders, why they're split and why they're coexisting in the same reality. It's because Perpetua basically split up and broke their reincarnation cycle from behind the source wall, because Perpetua is actually afraid of Hawkgirl, and there's something about Hawkgirl that might be the key to defeating Perpetua, and that's very interesting there. So the Hawk mythology and that reincarnation element of the Hawkman mythology, which had a very unique take by Venditti and Hawkman, it's a very interesting take in the pages of Justice League vis-a-vis Kendra Saunders and
No,
Shara Hall.
and you know what's interesting about that is I feel like that even permeates Hawkman. Obviously, they're connected, but he's reincarnating throughout space and time. So because it is that complex via the paradox that is time and space, especially in a fictional universe, all of his past selves are almost coexisting at the same time in a sense. They're all occurring just throughout different dimensions in space and time. So it's fascinating, and what I love, and correct me if I'm wrong. I know in the beginning, Boom, you thought it was a little bit slow. It was a little bit just like this Indiana Jones adventure. But I feel like as the story's developed, we've gotten a little bit faster paced. Not to mention, we are dealing with this really, really high art concepts. A lot of existentialism, especially in the issue 7, where we got the untold origin of Hawkman, and issue 8 with the Krypton. We're
Yeah,
getting a lot into identity, which is a persisting
yeah.
theme throughout Hawkman that I don't think has been done justice for a very long time. And
I yeah.
existentialism as it is, and what it means to be good and bad down to its most fundamental level.
Yeah. Uh, Sorry, just I have give me a moment here. What?
Sure. But yeah, if you guys are not reading Hawkman, I can't recommend it enough. I will always stress buying the floppies if you can too, because that more directly supports the market and the creators. If this remotely piques your interest, I think the trade for the first volume came out already, and if it hasn't, it's coming out soon. I definitely recommend you guys check that out and start picking this up. I'm sure you can find the first couple of issues even at your local comic book store. But in the chat, Taylor Pector, I'm still loving Doomsday Clock minus the delays. Justice League Dark has been great too. I've really enjoyed Justice League Dark. I agree with you 100% on your entire statement there, Taylor. Justice League Dark, unexpectedly, is by far my favorite Justice League book and my favorite team book coming out right now. I think Tynan has a pretty great grasp on all the characters, which is difficult to do, but he also really nails the dynamics between them, and how he's perpetuating their characterization, and forcing those things to interact and collide on the Doomsday Clock comment. Yeah, we've talked, I believe, about this too, Taylor. I get you. The delays are killing me. I think that, like I was saying earlier in this chat, I think that the delays are going to result in Jeff Johns editing the story and the script, and we may not get, what his initial vision was, and that could be to our detriment. Not to mention the fact that I just want to read the book. The first 4 issues, when they came out on a monthly basis, I was reading the first thing on the top of my stack every time. But the delays are killing me, and it's such a dense and complex book, and from what I read, I loved. So I want to make sure that I have everything kind of churning in my head to fully appreciate what comes next. So at that end, there's also the delays on top of the bi-monthly publishing that are killing it. So I'm just gonna wait till issue 10 comes out and read that. But
Yeah.
yeah, like what I was saying to Boom about Hawkman, just to get back to that. Is that it seems like Hawkman is kind of filling those needs that you were looking for in the beginning when the series came out. I know it seemed like in the beginning, I think that I liked this book a little bit more than you did. And I was, talking about how I think that the expository nature of the book is very necessary in a character who has a long and confusing history in B kind of is not as well known as a lot of the other big members of the DC pantheon. But it is also welcome in the sense that we have a lot of big stories that are moving at incredibly high speeds. So it's kind of a welcome departure.
Here, I personally hope with Hawkman, like you alluded to something that I think could make Hawkman. Hawkman right now is a good book bordering on greatness.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to make it great, and it may not get there, because I hope I'm wrong, but Vendetti, I've never really known him to be great at doing introspection. I never really got. I can't remember. I can't recall a single Green Lantern comic that he wrote where there was some vast philosophical revelation or some great character insight, or some sort of something that made me go and reflect. And so when you say that, I mean, Hawkman is a comic where he's on a redemption quest. He's Carter Hall has executed and murdered billions of lives. He's going to keep being reincarnated for so long until he saves as many lives as he took. That's his new origin. That's awesome. That, to me, he could be on a redemption quest. There's so many things, so many questions that one has philosophically that Venditti could answer. And I really hope Venditti, he's got an opportunity to really be introspective on Carter Hall, which is so incredible when you think about it, because Hawkman has a reputation for being a character that hits first and thinks later. He can change it up. He can actually evolve this character to be a character that stops hitting so much and stop being so angry and actually being reflective. And
Mm-hmm.
that, to me, is where the opportunity lies. And whether or not Venditti takes advantage of that, I think the jury's still out. I'm loving it so far. I just hope that your faith in him, and I'm starting to get more and more, I hope it's well placed.
2 quick comments, one of which is going to coattail off of that entirely. What I love is while he's answering a lot of questions about the character and his history, he's also resatisfying those questions with one big thing, and that is, what is Carter Hall going to do when he finally re-equates the number of lives he's saved with the number of lives he's killed, and whatever decision he makes at the end of that is going to totally redefine the character, along with the redefinition that Venditti is kind of engaging in now. Right at the end of the day, will he let himself rest, or as a hero, will he acknowledge the fact that there's still plenty to do, and will he defy everything that he's ever wanted in order to be the hero? Or will there be another motivation? We never know. And I think it does an excellent job on the topic of just briefly Venditti kind of being a little bit more introspective and high concept here. I think that throughout Venditti's writing, he's used different characters as a vehicle for very different things, and whether or not they're all introspective, I don't think is really, to me at least, isn't doesn't denote quality, because for me, his Green Lantern run, generally speaking, has to deal with a lot of the big central themes, and that is emotion and being willful and having the courage to do the impossible, and that's something that he uses Green Lantern as a vehicle to explore. Whereas Hawkman, being somebody without a really succinct identity, gives him the chance to play with that existentialism and gives him a chance to play with, finding an identity amongst a character who has had many, and finding a way to kind of polymerize all of those different things into evolving him, like you were saying before. So I think each character can be a vehicle for some very different statements, and very different concepts. And I think that he's doing superbly well with Hawkman. And again, I can't recommend that you guys pick this book up enough. It is action, adventure, high concept, all in one, beautiful artwork. Brian Hitch is doing some of the best work of his career, in my opinion. And I can't recommend that you guys support the book, because I think if he's given the time, he will define Hawkman like Jeff Johns defined the Green Lanterns.
Yeah.
Mark my words on that.
I want to give a shout out to one other comic book. I think one of the things DC's done two things right in the last month or so. The first thing is they've canceled Titans, which was a mercy kill. It's about bloody time. It lasted way too bloody long. It squandered its premise. Started off as Titans Hunt and was supposed to be one of the forefront comic books bringing in Rebirth, and yet it lost its direction. It lost its reason to exist. And Teen Titans under Adam Glass. What a breath of fresh air. I mean, this is a guy, he introduces like 4 new characters, and they're all interesting. From Crush character to the Blue Bolt or whatever, what's that character's name? And the Genie. I mean, really, he's done a really good job. Teen Titans feels like Rebirth. It feels like, despite even having a dark Damian there who's got his own prison with the black mask there and what have you, it's Damian has some darkness in him, but Teen Titans is actually under Adam Glass. That's a talent that I'm glad they have. If they move fresh talent like Adam Glass in there and hit it out of the park like that, like what a wonderful breath of fresh air. So, like I said, we started off negative in this video, and I think I'm kind of glad that we're ending on a high note here.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
the way I feel about the DC universe. I do feel generally optimistic about the DC universe, notwithstanding the suppression.
no, I mean, I'm also very glad that we were able to turn this and make this a more positive conversation, because, I'm very self-aware in the fact that I am a very nitpicky human being, and I tend to be a little bit pessimistic. But at the end of the day, I want these stories to do well. I want the medium to do well, and I want these companies to create great stories. Teen Titans, I can agree on. I'm a little bit behind, but between the first couple of issues of it that I had read, it's a breath of fresh air. I know a lot of people are complaining about the fact that Damian's kind of being a little bit more of a prick again. I will take that comment and raise you this: he's 13. Like, if you can honestly say that at no point in your early teenagedom you were a prick at any time, I'd call you a liar.
Yeah.
So it's not it's not like an unorganic way to play with the character and add new faults, and therefore kind of add new stories, right? In a character like Teen Titans, that's almost entirely about the dynamics between the characters. You gotta include some sort of strife and issues that each one has to deal with, and it makes sense to do what they're doing with Damian. I mean, yeah, he's doing these very extremist things, but at the end of the day, like, he's still 10 steps forward from where he started when he was first introduced. He's not killing people.
Yeah.
So, and he's choosing a path of justice. So, I think that Adam Glass is definitely breathing some fresh air into the Teen Titans. I agree with you. It is exponentially better than what any other DC work he's ever done. And the first thing that comes to mind is his mediocre New 52 Suicide Squad. It feels good to see something fresh and new, and I definitely want to catch up. I think the last issue I read was like 25. That was almost entirely about the character of Crush. But again,
Yeah.
a lot of interesting dynamics. The art's been pretty good. For my money, I think they should have kept Robson Roca, who drew this page that you guys can probably barely see behind me. On art, Bernard Chang is fine. But I hope that they can get, if I could have one ask of the gods of DC, let Robson Roca draw that book again. Like he did the Teen Titans special. It was gorgeous. But we've gone on a bit. Boom. Unless you have any other books you want to bring up, I think that it should be just about time to close out this
Yeah.
episode.
No, it's perfect. I just I took the I kissed my daughter goodnight, sent her off to bed, so it's time to watch Netflix binge with the wife. So
That's the moves. I'm gonna do things with my wife, and by my wife I mean my comic books. So first off, I want to thank everybody here who came to watch the show live. We really appreciate being able to chat with you guys and getting to bounce our ideas off of you and getting to hear what you have to say. So we appreciate you guys taking the time. Unfortunately, nobody really went for the free copy of Shazam. So if whoever is watching the recording later is still paying attention, let us know in the comments what you think, where you would like to see the DC universe go from here, and do that before Sunday. What'll that be? The 10th of February, the 9th, before the the 10th, before the end of the 10th, and you'll still be eligible. If you want to win a copy of The Best Defense Immortal Hulk #1, make sure to tweet at both myself and Comic Boom, letting us know what your favorite part of this episode was. And yeah, free comics, no catch. Boom, you want to let the good people know the internet what you've been up to, what's coming out?
Well, what I've been up to, I'm a little behind on my reviews, but I try to do it for a week. I check them out on my ComicBoom, my Twitter, Metropolis40, and I probably will be reviewing Justice League this week, and Man and Superman I'll probably just be doing 2 reviews this week, and maybe playing some catch up, and we'll see. Maybe I'll do a rant video. I'm not really sure, but yeah. Beyond that, I'll probably be taking it easy.
No, you guys should definitely make sure to go check out Comic Boom. The link to both his Twitter and to his YouTube channel are in the description below. The guy's awesome. I mean, it's got to mean something when I've been on a hiatus for this long, and the first person I wanted to talk to was Comic Boom. So you guys should definitely make sure to go check him out. Definitely a lot of benefits to watching his content. You'll learn a little bit more and frankly understand a little bit more about the characters and the medium, which is great.
Thank you for that. Right back at you, Dark Knight. Right back at you. You do great videos.
Appreciate that. On my end, I just put out the something episode of Comics Insider. I kind of went in and dissected Young Justice #1, which is eligible for a free giveaway on that episode. So again, if you go watch that video, follow the requirements that I set there by Sunday the 10th, you'll be eligible to win a free copy of that. And then there's also eligibility to win a free copy of, if I have it somewhere here, Invaders #1, here it is. Invaders #1 by Chip Zdarsky, also eligible for giveaway on that video. Again, you must follow the requirements that I set forth before Sunday the 10th. But we really went into the stories. Of course, I didn't give away the big stingers. I left that for you guys to go and read. So if you're really worried about big spoilers, trust me, you should be all right. We go into it very briefly. The thematics that the writers are playing with, the visual storytelling, and just my general thoughts on the books. Keep an eye out. Hopefully, now that I have a decent scheduling between my work and my schooling, I'll be able to start being consistent again, relatively consistent. I do really want to put out a video talking about Tomasi's Detective overall because it's been really solid, and I haven't really done anything about that since the first issue came out. And hopefully, Boom and I will be able to start doing these live streams again on a fairly frequent basis to bring you guys. But at the end of the day, Boom, it was a blast getting to chat with you again.
And it's always a good time, Dark Knight. Thanks.
And again, thank you to you guys who are watching live, and thank you to you guys who are watching this later as a recording. Make sure to go check out Comic Boom and myself and subscribe to both of our channels. The link to his is in the description below. And while you're there, there is that big fat red subscribe button that you can click on my end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to click that like button. And this is going to be Dark Knight Nation and Comic Boom signing out for the night. Thank you, guys.
See you later.